In contemplating the writing of his autobiography, Mark Twain once wrote, "What a wee little part of a person's life are his acts and his words. His real life is led in his head and is known to none but himself. All day long, the mill of his brain is grinding, and his thoughts, not those other things, are his history. His acts and his words are merely the visible thin crust of his world. And they are so trifling a part of his bulk, a mere skin enveloping it. The mass of him is hidden. It and its volcanic fires that toss and boil and never rest night nor day. These are his life, and they are not written and cannot be written." Real life is led in our heads, Twain argues. The mass of who we are is here, hidden. What do you think? Are your thoughts in your head what make up the real you? And if so, then what are your thoughts saying about who you really are? I don't know about you, but my mind is a hard place to live these days. It's harder to be there than it has been to be at home for these past 7 months. In ordinary times, when we live our lives out there in the world beyond our front doors, working and shopping and eating and going to school right alongside other people, when we are out there in the world, then our mind can be a kind of refuge, a safe and private place where we can think whatever petty, mean, outrageous, self-absorbed thought we want, as long as we don't act on it. In our heads, we can shout, scream, swear, sulk. We can say all the things we would never actually say. We can indulge fantasies and fears. In our minds, we can even do the things we would never do. We can welcome any thought and express it to ourselves and only ourselves without having to edit or delete. No matter what we have to do in our outward lives to get by, to get along, to make do, to make nice, in our minds, we can stage a quiet rebellion. And yet, what's inside of us is the foundation for everything that comes out of us. Our thoughts shape how we see the world and how we live in it. Our thoughts give rise to our words and to our actions. And so the author of Proverbs writes, "Watch your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life." And Jesus, too, had some very pointed things to say about the life of the mind, teaching us in his Sermon on the Mount that harmful thoughts are as bad as harmful actions. A lot of us are living with the reality of this in a new way these days. Our minds are full of frightening visions of the future of our country and our world, full of news that enrages us, full of an overload of information and opinion that we take in from our screens. Information and opinion that then bang around in our brain like relentless noise. Twain likened our thoughts to volcanic fires that toss and boil and never rest night nor day. And wow, does that feel true. From the moment our feet touch the floor in the morning until our head touches the pillow at night and even beyond. Our minds are going. They are off doing their thing. And it can be exhausting. And sometimes it all feels almost like an assault. Like the thoughts crashing around inside us is something happening to us rather than something we are actually doing ourselves, engaging in. We don't plan our thoughts the way we somewhat plan our actions and our words. We don't think about what we're going to think ahead of time. We don't plan our thoughts. They just seem to happen to us. And yet, the best spiritual teachers have always taught us that we have more power than that. Even when it comes to our thoughts, we have thoughts. Our thoughts do not have us, which means we have choices. We can be in charge of our thinking, just as we can be in charge of our actions and our words. It may not come naturally. It may not come easily, but we have choices about how we think and what we think about and what we do with the thoughts we have. The Apostle Paul was one of the spiritual teachers who taught this, and he lived it. He showed the power we have to set the course of our thinking. When he was imprisoned and knew he would likely be executed, he wrote a letter to the churches in Philippi, and at the end of the letter he wrote, "Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say, rejoice." Here is a man locked away from everyone he loves, pondering the ending of his life by violent means, likely living in physical and emotional pain, little power, no power to change his circumstances. And he writes a letter that is so thoroughly infused with joy from first to last, his most joyful letter, in fact. And in it, he tells others to choose joy as well in every circumstance. Imagine that. This is a man who knows a kind of pointed persecution, the likes of which most of us will never know. Thank goodness. He knows the limits of his power to change his current circumstances. He knows what it's like to be cut off from his normal, active life and tethered inside with himself and his mind. And he knows something about the capacity of the mind to choose what it thinks and how it thinks about it. Do not be anxious about anything, he writes, but in everything, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. At every turn, Paul lifts up these two startling possibilities, these two startling realities, no matter the circumstance: joy and peace. No matter the dark fears that might be assaulting his mind, he chooses joy. No matter the anguish and the anger that threaten to keep his mind in their clutches, he chooses joy. No matter the roiling, boiling volcano of desperate and destructive thoughts that want to rise, he finds a peace that passes understanding. How does he do it? He knows where to put his mind. He says it like this: whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. This is how a man living in dark times finds his way out of dark thoughts and towards gratitude, prayer, peace, and joy. He points his mind in the right direction. He doesn't have a choice about his circumstances, but he realizes he does have a choice about his thoughts. And the thoughts he chooses become who he is. They become the truths that shape his character and his living. His life embodies what he chooses to let grow in his mind. Now, this is not the same thing as mere positive thinking. This is not about creating our own reality or pretending away our pain or ignoring the brutal truth of suffering, injustice, and evil. That's not positive thinking. That's denial. That's another way of living in the fantasy inside our own heads. And neither Paul nor Jesus was ever anything less than honest about the truth of the human condition, about the truth of the condition of the world. The darkness in the world and the darkness in our own hearts, these are real. And the Christian life is not a life that closes its eyes and pretends all that away. The Christian life is not a simplistic avoidance of hard things in an effort to uphold the exhausting pretense that everything is just fine. A clear mind, a mind at peace, is never a mind that simply denies reality. It's never a mind that pretends things are not difficult or even worrying. It is a mind that has chosen to look at reality with clear eyes and then to patiently, intentionally, doggedly look into that reality for what is true. It's a mind that makes the intentional effort every day in the midst of all circumstances to pursue what is noble, honorable, ethical, reliable. It's a mind that spends time reflecting on what justice is, on what is right, on what it would look like for reality to reflect real justice. It's a mind that ponders what is pure, authentic, genuine, real. It's a mind that makes the time to linger on thoughts that are lovely, thoughts that are focused on what is truly delightful and soul satisfying and life-giving, rather than on what is superficially gratifying or stimulating. It's a mind that commits itself to the contemplation of what is deeply, truly good, even in the midst of so much that is bad. A mind that sustains that kind of thinking and that kind of thoughtfulness then leads the entire self, thoughts, words, actions, character, to be shaped by something deeper and bigger and truer than the circumstances at hand. To put our minds on these things is to put our minds on seeing what is of God in the midst of every circumstance. The Lord is near, Paul writes. The Lord is near, always. We cannot even begin to imagine the power in such thinking, the power to shape our lives and our life together toward the revolutionary goodness and truth that can change the world. To carry inside us a mind that is not churning like so much lava, that is not tossing our emotions around and driving our behavior so compulsively. This is what we all want, isn't it? A mind that is calm and steady, centered, even while being actively engaged and intentionally attentive. A peace that passes understanding, a peace that surpasses our daily ups and downs. To live like this in times like these is a hard choice, but it is a choice. We do have that power, the power to choose. There are so many things about our current reality right now that we do not have power over, but we do have power over where we put our attention. We do have power over where we get our information and what we do with it, what we do with the thoughts that come in response. And this power we have when it comes to our minds, this power we have is not the power of force. This is not a sort of thought control experiment on ourselves. It isn't the thought-stopping techniques of demagogues, the rejection of rationality, the closing down of critical thinking. The power we have over our minds is not the power of fixing or forcing. It's the power of choosing and cultivating and nurturing and sustaining. When Paul says, think on these things, the Greek word he uses is a gentle one. It isn't, think about this. It is instead, keep thinking. That is what the word means. Keep thinking. Keep thinking on these things. Consider these things. It's a way of saying cultivate these habits of thought, not by imposition, not by clamping down, but by the intentional, gentle, regular discipline of returning your mind to the best things, returning your mind to the truest things you know. And even now, there is no shortage of ways for us to find such seeds for contemplation, seeds for growing beautiful thoughts and beautiful lives. It starts with making the decision that this is what we're going to do. We are not going to be captives to our own minds. We're going to be intentional. We're going to make choices. It starts with that decision. And then it means choosing to create the space and the time in our lives to actually pay attention to what is going on in our heads, what is going on inside us. We let our minds get so cluttered that they can become like the hall closet. We have only a dim awareness of what all is piling up in there. We have to make the space for ourselves, make the time in our days to get clear again, to spend time in there being honest about what we find. Make the time to think about what is good and what our gratitudes are. Make the time to be grateful. Make time for prayer, for the gentle opening of the heart and mind to God. For prayer grounded in thankfulness, but also pressing towards God with need and desire and hope. And then throughout the day, to choose and choose again, to look for what is lovely, to see what is really true, to search for what is good. We can pursue this every day in every circumstance. Listen to gorgeous music, read great literature, eat real food, mindfully and with gratitude. Spend time with scripture. Go outside and gaze at the golden trees and the October sky and breathe the crisp fall air. Spend pure, undistracted time with people who matter, even if you can only see them on the screen. Spend that time with them undistracted. See them. Look for what is true in them and noble and lovely and excellent. Look and see God in them. Every day we have countless choices about where to put our minds. Paul reminds us that through the daily choices to contemplate the best things, we can find our way towards Christ, which means we find our way towards joy and towards peace and towards being the people we were meant to be, with lives full of Christ's life, lives full of joy and full of peace and full of good. What do you think? What do you think? Are the thoughts in your head what make up the real you? And if so, then what are your thoughts saying about who you really are? And what choices can you make? What choices will you make about who you will become? Beloved, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. And the God of peace will be with you.